Titleist is the number one ball in golf. Yes, being number one is a number, and more players trust the Pro V1 or Pro V1X than all other golf balls combined. But being number one is more than a number. It's a mindset. It's a relentless mission to design and manufacture the best performing golf balls in the game, so you can chase whatever your number one is. Titleist, the number one ball in golf.
Hello and welcome to episode 118 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's ongoing exploration of the question that has a different answer for everyone who plays the game. Rod Morri is my name, and on this episode we're going to meet a man who's been part of the new golf media since the early part of this century. Many will know Geoff Shackelford from his self-named blog, and some will be aware of his other work, including several important books on golf course architecture, his Substack newsletter, The Quadrilateral, focusing on the majors, and his various podcast hosting and co-hosting duties. But, as always, there's more to people and their relationship with golf than meets the eye, and that is what we'll be exploring in this interview. Our jumping off point for the discussion was the same as it ever is. I asked Geoff, what's the thing about golf for Geoff Shackelford?
The thing about golf, it's multi-layered. It's complicated. It's fascinating on many fronts, as you well know, from the courses to the equipment to the professional game to the etiquette to the characters. It's there's nothing quite like it in the world of sports, and I think that's I guess why I still enjoy following it, even in these bizarre times with quite a bit of greed on display.
Well, we'll come to all of that and a couple of other familiar topics, I'm sure, as we go. What you're suggesting there is that there's no the thing about golf, perhaps, Geoff. Is that one of its attractions?
Oh, there's no one thing.
That's kind of the point, isn't it? It's a multi-layered thing. Where did it start for you, the golf interest?
Like a lot of people, tagging along with my dad and granddad, playing golf, wanting to drive the cart, and I think that's probably from at least I don't know. I think quite a few generations now. That's been you hear that a lot. That was just most people found the game. I'm not going to say accidentally, but they in a way that was a little more closer to accidental, organic, whatever word you want to use. And because and it's why I think we've always rolled our eyes in some state of the game chats at some of these forced programs, because those don't seem like a recipe for a long lasting relationship. Whereas if you find it accidentally, and of course we know there are some people who just have this draw that have nothing to do with family or friends, and I always mention Aditya Shak from India who just saw a driving range and sitting at lunch and was drawn to it, and now she's on the LPGA tour. So there are a lot of different ways, but I think that's the best way into the game, are those sort of gentle, subtle, slow. Instead of the forced, here's a club, here's what you do, try this, and that might work for some people, but that's kind of how I found it.
Yeah. Just a quick side note for those who may not be aware, Geoff and I have been co-hosting along with Mike Clayton a podcast called State of the Game for, well, Geoff, it's about 12 years now, so we're a bit older than when we started. So if anybody's interested, you can go and have a listen to that. That notion of being introduced to the game, Geoff, you're right. We had a couple of generations of caddies where a lot of players came from caddies and people discovered the game through caddying. I think Mike Clayton was one of them. Our own Peter Fowler, credentialed professional down here, was another. Lots of people have tried to crack that nut in the modern era. What do you think's changed, perhaps, about how people find golf? Because you're right, it's rare to find the golfer who's searched the game out themselves, for want of a better term. Most of us are introduced, aren't we? We've all tried to crack that nut. What's so tough about the golf nut in terms of getting people started?
Well, we know how difficult it is from the beginning, and it's so intimidating. And I think that is the one positive of a lot of the initiatives we've seen in the last decade, is that they are designed to try to make it less intimidating. And just go. It's just very, the whole the whole package, the way the swing works, the embarrassment of the miss, how does the whole thing work with driving range and or a paying a green fee, and we know golf, at least here in the United States, is always well behind other industries, and so as a service operation, it's generally been deplorable. Gruff assistants, gruff starters, corrupt starters at public courses here. Just the whole package of all those things is just really obnoxious. And in spite of all that, we actually are having success. Ironically, one of the more interesting things going on right now in the city of Los Angeles is our public courses are still terribly run. They're not well maintained. But one thing they did was farm out all the food and beverage to these hipster food operations, and it's done a couple things. It's allowed people to, first of all, realize they could come eat lunch at a golf course, which a lot of people think every course is like a private club, which is, to me alone, it tells you about that intimidation factor or elitism strain that even goes, trickles down to the most basic public course. And so that's been fascinating to hear how many people just came to that realization. And then, of course, when they go, oh, well, this is kind of interesting. There's all these characters. The food is good, and the way they do the modern food operation is indoor, outdoor, and there's a vibe, and it just changes the atmosphere of the place. And we just need it to translate now to the way the places are run. But it's exciting to hear that people are less. They look down on the game less, even if they're not playing or they're not interested. But it's something they suddenly have an open mind to more. And that's been another issue for the sport here over the years. And I feel like that's broken down significantly in recent times. I don't even know if that got to your answering your question, but
it kind of does.
But I do think that intimidation factor is something that is just is just huge to get rid of. And also just the embrace of alternative forms of golf between Top Golf, par 3 courses, just being a driving range golfer. There's some people like that who just enjoy hitting the ball. They don't have the time or the desire to make the commitment to a full round. Executive courses have flipped from being seen as, not real golf to great places to learn the game, or great places if you're older and you don't want to play a big course. So we've broken down some really great, really terrible barriers in a positive way, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting because all of those things you touch on there, and we recognise many of them in Australian golf as well, it's everything that golf in Scotland doesn't do, isn't it? Golf in Australia, and I suspect America as well, it's very much over there. The golf courses aren't in the middle of towns. Those that are under pressure, the public ones, are under pressure to be resumed for other uses and those kinds of things. Right. And anyone who's been to Scotland will recognise that, won't they? That golf isn't just a part of the community. Whether you play or not, we don't seem to see as much of that really anti-golf attitude in Scotland as what I think you see in America, and we certainly see here in Australia in some of those debates. It's funny that where the game – it's one of the things we didn't adopt from Scotland that perhaps would have been fabulous if we had in terms of golf, is that accessibility.
Well, there's no question that just putting up a fence around a golf course is one of the big problems we face here, but you understand why people do it. Mm-hmm. In Scotland, you just have very few golf courses that are fenced off. And then you have a law that allows people access to the links to get to the beach. So that alone it's probably it's very similar to what I was talking about with the food and beverage change here in LA. Even if people aren't a golfer in that Scottish town, they can walk their dog to the beach. They go through the golf course. The golf course is an asset to them because it's not, they're not going through a neighborhood or having to go through a locked gate or something. They're just going through the golf course to get to the beach. Yeah. And I just know that changes people's view of the sport. And so that's why it's not been an issue there, and probably will never be an issue. Granted, it took a certain kind of law. It takes a certain kind of culture and population size. Certain big cities here, it would be an issue. But as you probably know, that Malcolm Gladwell's kind of become synonymous with this anti-golf mentality, and a lot of his hostility pathetically started with bitching about not being able to jog through a place right up the street from where I live called Brentwood Country Club. Well, it's a private club. And by the way, there's a beautiful decomposed granite path around the entire course that he could jog on. But his whole thing started with, what a waste of green space. I can't jog through this or run through it. Excuse me. I'm sorry to all the runners out there. He's a runner. Meanwhile, by the way, I have recently seen him. First of all, he's Mr. New York City, but I've seen him twice in LA now, which is, what I don't even get out that much. And I've seen him at our beautiful Palisades Park running overlooking the ocean. And I wanted to stop him the time I saw him there and say, this isn't good enough. You also need to tear down a golf course to get your running, anyway. So, but the point is fences and that closed off approach. I understand why people do it, but I also understand why it's rubbed people a certain way about the sport.
Yeah. Perhaps you could have stopped him, Geoff, and pointed out this would have been a beautiful place for a golf course if it wasn't for this stupid park.
Yeah.
People run through it.
Gosh, the cliff top holes. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, indeed. It points to something I think about this occasionally. We use the word exclusive a lot in golf, and we don't mean it in this way. But golf, in fact, when you look at it, what we're talking about, there's a lot of exclusion, isn't there? Both within the game and towards the outside world. How do we change? I don't think that's universal, and I think there's a growing number of golfers that you've mentioned for whom that's not the reason to play. There are a lot of aspirational golfers for whom that is, but how do we keep that sort of movement growing? Because the danger for golf, of course, isn't the Brentwood Country Club. It's not in any peril at all. But the local municipal council-owned course is. And that's madness. How do we save that part of golf? It's crucial for the game's future, clearly.
Yeah, and we still have the same issues with people viewing the game a certain way, and so those places are almost always under threat because they are still seen, even if it's as much of a muni as it can possibly be, and a valuable asset to the community. That exclusivity still taints the places. I mean, you just have to look at Lions Muni in Austin, how long they've been fighting to try to save this. And a very progressive city, and one where Ben Crenshaw, this is where he learned. People know that it's got this amazing history. It broke racial barriers. It's a beautiful course. Why the University of Texas would need to build on it, but there are enough people who are just kind of like, it's golf and it's snobbery. And I think the only way is to I felt very strongly that for years the USGA's number one mission should have been to be getting involved in these fights. We have an amazing organization here, the Southern California Golf Association, that currently has 14 courses on its endangered at-risk list. Wow. And that's with them having just knocked a few off. And they're advocates. They're almost like an emergency response team. But they're also trying to get the word out on what these places mean to a community. And that's really what we need. And I've always felt like the USGA has that name. The RNA's started to get involved in a couple little things like that, but we'd love to see them throw their weight around too, because I do think that, especially the way those two organizations have, I would say, transformed or have shifted in the last few years, they're less snobby and elitist. A few years ago, it might have been tough for, even though David Fay's a very, very liberal guy, the bow tie and kind of sounding like George Will, that might not have gone over too well because he's a very well-spoken guy, but it may have sounded elitist. And so I think they've changed, and they could be more powerful. Plus, they have all these elements within the USGA that know the history of the sport, the agronomy, blah, 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 that could kind of tie a lot of things together for a community that's wondering why they should keep the course. They're doing amazing research on water and pace of play and all sorts of other stuff that they need projects like these to kind of let people know what they're doing. And I may be wrong that the name USGA might mean nothing to a community or the RNA, but I'm pretty sure it would be helpful. And then but the other thing, Rod, I increasingly hear people just not really caring about the elite world. I mean, you see it all the time when somebody reviews a very exclusive course and people are just like, that's great. But who cares?
Yeah.
None of us can ever play there.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see there. I think there used to be I felt like there was an aspirational thing where a lot of golfers wanted to hear about those places and they dreamed someday of either getting to play them or get on them. And there's still some of that, but I think there's a few things that may have contributed to this. One, there's just people who have been to some of these very elite places are blown away. And sometimes they think, what a bunch of knobs and the place is uptight. That wasn't any fun. So that's been one thing. And I think then, I mean, Mike Kaiser, even though those resorts that he's created are expensive, you can go there and experience world-class golf and world-class service and an experience without having to join a club. So you have that, and you have some of these other things that you can join where you get access to many courses. Things like that are kind of chipping away at the mystique of a club, and just the world's going in some different ways where it's like, yeah, fine, they do their thing, but it's a little like the game right now where, I mean, there are real signs that the recreational game is just completely divorced from the professional game, and it's a similar kind of thing. Well, that's just a different kind of golf, and that's fine. Those people can do that, but there's millions more doing this other thing and going their own separate way, and that's a fascinating dynamic. And I don't know if the elitism element of the game will ever go away. So, and that's fine.
So it seems unlikely, but there's no question there's a place for us. And we're all guilty of it in some ways, I guess. Who wouldn't want to have a crack at Augusta National? But would you want to be a member there? I don't think I'd fit in. So there's about that. Just to back up a bit, Jeff, and you're right, and I've written a lot about this, as have a lot of others in Australia. It's been quite at the pointy end of golf news in the last couple of years. What's the pushback from golfers against the arguments of it's for the few, not the many, and it's an extraordinary amount of space to devote, public space to devote to a single recreation? What are the pushbacks against those? I've got a couple of ideas, but listeners to the podcast might occasionally come across at a social function somewhere, God forbid, where there's non-golfers, someone who has these sorts of attitudes. What are the pushbacks? What are those people not seeing that we do? How do we sell golf better in that way, I think?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, that restaurant element here is one of those many little ways that you realize the sport just needs to show that it's a community asset, and that people are there getting exercise, they're doing something different. I think another thing you see at a lot of places now is how many kids are out there. It used to be an older audience, and when people see that there are kids out there playing, that just changes their perception. And then we know the green space argument, which golf has struggled with because of years of probably excessive use of chemicals and different things, and the green grass obsession, and that's all still there. But we know modern agronomy has so many more tools, has chipped away at so much of probably the less attractive things that you put on a golf course in certain areas. Obviously, the Sand Belt has never had this issue quite like we do here, but that is a perception, and it will probably always be there, especially in places where water's an issue, and there's just not much you can do. But I certainly think that we know the old course and being closed one day a week is massive, both for the condition of the turf, but also that community asset element, and we are getting little bits and pieces of stories where more and more courses are doing something like that once a month, or they're just doing different things to highlight to people what a golf course does besides be just a place where people go whap it around and play. That there are benefits to for wildlife and bird life, or I mean, it's sad that you sometimes have to explain. It's like, well, we have a housing crisis. Okay, but is this really going to be a better thing to replace it with? And we've seen many places where they shut the course down without a firm plan, and then the thing goes to seed. I mean, it's astonishing how bad a golf course turns, or how quickly it turns bad.
Hmm.
And then it becomes people go, well, this is awful, and it's whatever, it's breeding mosquitoes, or it's become a homeless encampment, or it's just awful looking, and it's not as wildlife friendly now because it's just gone awry. And it's like, well, there is a certain beauty to a maintained course and a functioning course to a community. And so I think the sport just has to keep doing those little things to mimic elements of what went on in Scotland. You may never be able to take down fences and things, but I do think there are those little PR related elements that help. And then obviously just having more people playing the sport right now has helped. At least I can speak to Southern California. I know when they've had some of the meetings, so many people have turned up. And in the past, when some of these places were in danger, yeah, it was just a lot of cranky old guys that would show up and scream and yell. Well, all of a sudden now it's this diverse group of people of all ages who are fighting for places. And just the volume of golfers really helps when these fights come up, and they're going to keep coming up, sadly.
Yeah, it's never going to, that one's never going to end, is it? No matter how big the victory you think you've just had, it's just one more step that's going to happen. They're going to come back.
Yep.
Again, there'll be issues. You neatly segued in some ways into something that I did want to talk to you about, because apart from golf, obviously, there's a media element to what you do. GeoffShackelford.com is a, 25-year overnight success? Is that what we would call it?
Yeah, I mean, I've basically moved the whole thing to the newsletter.
Yep.
I just post my newsletter items there. But yeah, it's been going, quite a while. And it was a natural transition to go to newsletters just to make a living. And also just that's how you get to people now, and instead of websites.
Yeah, less people are coming to you. The option for you to deliver to them is there. But
yeah.
What it made me think of, Geoff, and I don't know if we talk about this enough in golf, in a way, golf's a victim of its own success. We've got our own media. You and I know each other well. In fact, there'll be people listening to this podcast who will be saying right now, there's nothing new yet. I've heard both of you say all of these things before, because we've been talking about this for a long time. The people we really need to talk to are the people outside the game, aren't they? And golf, I'm not sure, we say golf doesn't do a good job as though it's one amorphous mass with a common goal. It's not, obviously. But we don't do a good job of selling the game outside the game, do we? The things that we highlight are not bad things, but it tends to be the professional game. The Masters last week, the Chevron this week, just to give people a clue as to when we're recording, Nelly Korda winning 5. Those are the things that tend to make the general news. You never see a story in a newspaper or on a local TV. I won't say never, but very rarely do you see stories about golf that aren't about that. And that feels like maybe one of the big ones. We in golf understand all these issues and can't understand why those outside golf don't. But we've done a bad job of telling them, haven't we? And I don't know how we do that. There's a lack of interest, isn't there, in mainstream media in anything that's not Tiger Woods or, Lydia Ko.
Yeah, well, I guess the only thing I'd push back on is that, and it's not you and me, but there's certainly an audience that's really loving a lot of the influencer type content, and that's been really helpful, I think, in giving people, even though we know a lot of these things are sometimes paid to like something. It's engaging people in a different way. But again, they're golfers. I don't know how many people really want to read about what a golf course does, but those articles do pop up when there is a controversy or something. I guess, though, I would say I wrote a piece for Links at the beginning of the year, and now I'm trying to work on a little bit of a follow-up, But what's been amazing in all this, Rod, is that we've actually broken that supposed connection between the professional game and the recreational game. And so even though people who don't really know golf are well aware of the Saudi story and the money talk, they're really, and a lot of golfers are just not associating it with the game. It's just a pro sports controversy, really. And that's amazing. I thought for sure it would do some damage, and maybe it has. And maybe some people see it as elitist, but the numbers are suggesting that now people are out playing golf, and they're not watching as much, and they probably don't care as much about this group of players. And I don't even know if it's the money. I think it's more that they've just made it so transactional. So I think the sport not being lumped in with this professional controversy is a really fascinating thing to explore and think about. And I mean, there have been a couple comments recently that are just stunning where, the CEO of TaylorMade just talking about, well, it's just that thing. Yeah, we want it to be fixed and settled, and it's really not affecting our business. And you had Steve Cohen, one of the investors in the PGA Tour Group, and his main premise, at least in this one answer, was that they see America going to a 4-day work week, and that extra day is more recreational time outdoors. And therefore, they're bullish on golf. They're not bullish on golf because of pro golfers. So that would be an amazing flip, that they actually see the recreational game being the way to rebuild interest in the pro game. That would be wild.
Yeah.
That's a wild flip. So anyway, I don't know, how much the coverage can really, I guess the ultimate answer to your question is golf probably should not worry about that, because it's a niche sport. It's always going to be a niche sport, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Niche is only bad if you're just trying to make more money and grow. And right now it's a very healthy niche sport, and the focus should be on sustainability, not growth.
In that professional arena, we'll probably talk a bit more about that a bit later, because, of course, it has been a busy time in particularly men's professional golf and everything that's going on there. How much do you think of what we're seeing now? What Scotty Scheffler is doing is extraordinary, as is what Nelly Korda's doing. Neither have reached the media hype heights of Tiger. You and I have been privileged to have covered the game in the era of Tiger Woods, and I do mean that. It's been an extraordinary juggernaut to have ridden for close to 30 years now. How much of that do you think is a Tiger hangover? It's hard for a sport, is it not, to recover from a personality and identity as big as Tiger. Not many other sports have ever had a Tiger Woods.
Yeah. Oh no, it's we're seeing it. It's a real struggle for the pro game, but I don't think it's hurting the everyday game. And really, I don't know if there were that many numbers that validated that Tiger grew the game. He may have diversified it, made it more intriguing to people who didn't watch. He has a certain style and mystique and personality, and came along at a certain time and kind of broke down some barriers. Well, he didn't kind of. He did break down some barriers. It's still amazing to think, when he was a junior, some of the stuff that he faced in terms of because of his race. And so there are all these other things and that wasn't that long ago. And so he's just different. And it's absurd to think that anybody will come along for a while that could have a similar impact. I don't know what that person looks like or would be like. And I don't know if that's vital, because we have seen certain people come along in the history of the sport who made a difference when it was lagging. Bobby Jones and young Tom Morris, and you just go through the eras, and there was somebody with a certain style and way that elevated golf to the front pages, and that cliche and all that. But I also think it's a little overrated, that idea that we need that to bolster the sport. So. I right now we have two, unbelievably dominant players, and you and I know what they're doing is off the charts amazing, because I think we agree that there's parity, and the equipment has brought a certain level of parity. And so to see two people rising above that makes what they're doing even more incredible. Obviously, Scheffler's playing against a little, what's the word? I don't want to say softer,
No.
but he's just not playing against as robust a field as
he could be.
He could be.
Yes.
But that doesn't diminish what he's doing, because he's still dominating. And maybe he doesn't win one of these but I still think what he's doing would be incredible, and he's just on a different level. And again, doing it in an era when he is striking the ball in the center of the club face with regularity, but other people who don't are brought up to a certain level. And I think that's pretty wild to see.
Lots of criticism lately about lack of personality in the professional game. That's not a new thing. There's always somebody who thinks there's no personalities in the professional game. Do you think that's true? It's interesting, the role of the big star, isn't it? Palmer probably did more for the game in many ways than Nicklaus, yet his golf record isn't as good. Tiger was perhaps the combination of both, where he had the attention that Palmer had, and he had the record that Nicklaus had. What's the role of the big stars? I've been guilty of it myself, though not quite so harshly. Scotty Scheffler's not particularly dynamic, is he? He's interesting to listen to if you're into golf, but he's not a particularly dynamic personality. That's not a criticism. That's how he's built. That's part of how he's been so incredibly successful. Give me a chunk of that any day, I'll go okay. But what's the role of, then, the stars of the game? And this, I think, is really pertinent to what's happening between LIV and the PGA Tour and all of those other things that have come along with that.
Well, again, I do think we probably overrate the importance of a big personality. There's just not many Arnold Palmers and Walter Hagens and Tiger Woodses and take your pick on the women's side. There've been some pretty interesting characters. Babe Zaharias sounds like she was just on another league when it came to personality and what she did to draw people to whatever sport she was playing, and she was good at all of them. But I think the downside, though, what we've seen is we've always had robotic, quiet people, because that's kind of key to a successful game for a lot of people. But we really don't have many bad guys or quirky types. We have Bryson, and he reminded us at the Masters how entertaining he is on all sorts of fronts. And Bubba had that a few years ago, and with his shot making and the way he moves the ball. But I think the way the game is played now, it's going to be hard to bring out a lot of personality between the way the ball doesn't move much and that it rewards kind of mostly power, and then the length of a round of golf, all these other dynamics that have been sort of stretched out in this distance chase. You just kind of erode at around the edges of somebody having the showing their personality on the course. And then they're surrounded by teams now, and it's the team and the team, and unfortunately we've seen a lot of these so-called teams are not feeding the player with much great information. They may be getting their mood up and their confidence up, but they're also kind of injecting this strange thing that happens where they tell the person that everybody's out to get them and bring them down, but we're here to protect you. And some people take that a certain way and run with it, and some people, it makes them kind of shut down and become a strange personality. I think that was what was cool about, again, we're discussing this right after Nelly Corda, and she mentioned team about 500 times in her various interviews, but you could see it. They did not. They're just trying to keep her focused on the target. They weren't. You don't sense that they're building up some sort of a strange wall around her that convinces her that everybody's out to bring her down. So I think that was nice to see, but I unfortunately have seen many others where some players, right now in the men's game that I've seen change just from when they came out to in just a matter of a few years, and they're still young guys, and they've become kind of jerks, and you can hear it in their comments, you can see it and read it in the transcript, that there's little bits here and there that suggest that, like, where are you getting this stuff that whatever it is. And then of course everything's a secret now. They're whatever they're working on and they don't want to share. Like, anybody gives a hoot. Not going to apply to their game. It's not going to apply to the competition's game. And and that tells you a lot about somebody that, oh boy, they're in a little bubble now. And that is not going to breed interesting personalities. And I mean, Bryson has a little of that, but he still is, he kind of gets the role of being an entertainer, and not many do. And it's a strange pressure to put on players. You'd like it to come out naturally. And And sometimes it does, but increasingly it doesn't.
Yeah, but he's an interesting one, Bryson, isn't he? I mean, he's somewhat polarizing. I'm not a great fan of Bryson and the things he does, but you couldn't deny the interest that he draws to the game. I feel like he's one, and Minwoo Lee's another that I really see it in, who really enjoys the limelight. They like to sort of ham it up and that sort of thing, and you don't see so much of that in golf, do you? Because frankly, if you want to get really good at golf, generally that tends not to be a way to have your emotions on this roller coaster of how you want to maintain that even keel. You need some of that entitlement and ego, don't you, Geoff, though, to be at the top of the game? That's the balancing act, isn't it? I mean, Jack wasn't short on belief in Jack, but you didn't see the entitlement, I guess. That's perhaps the change. And what do you think brings that on? Money's obviously part of it, but it's a changed media environment do something to that as well?
Yeah, it's a combination of money. It's a combination of they can kind of get their own message out now, and they don't need press, so they don't. They just view it as an annoying obligation. I mean, Scheffler is great in an interview, but he throws in these little weird nuggets that imply. I mean, I just read at Hilton Head, early in the week, he said, the whole thing with his wife and having a baby, the press blew that out of proportion. So well, you brought it up. Well, that's people. And you mentioned that somebody has a phone on the course and there's a jet ready to go. Like, you've got to have some understanding sometimes. I realize they're good at what they do because they stay in this lane, but you have to have some understanding that sometimes you share these things and it's a story, and it's not a bad story. It is the story, and don't be hostile. But a lot of them now are increasingly hostile. And I get it. You go in the comments sections of some of these things and the weird stuff people know about players and the weird stuff they want to know. And so some of that I do understand. It makes them, it creeps them out. But it's always ironic. They blame it on writers and media when it's oftentimes stuff they put out into the world, and nobody went and dug this up. And I think a lot of that started with Tiger. I mean, he still is pretty hostile to the written word, I think, in a lot of ways. He still thinks that a lot of his scandal, I mean, he's better, no question. And he's great when he's in a great mood. He's amazing in interviews now, kind of like Nicklaus has gotten as he's gotten older. But you think, gee, you really think that golf writers were the ones that exposed you? And yet he'll go on talk shows where they used to make jokes, 10 jokes a night at his expense, and he'll go on those. But golf writers are kind of it's a strange thing. So you're right, though, that the sport breeds a certain, to be successful, you have to have a quiet mind and a calm mind and a low heart rate. And it would be nice if the equipment was just tweaked a little bit so that the way the sport is played brought out a few more diverse personalities and just brought out more personality with some shot making and the stuff that goes with the occasional snap hook, the humility that comes with it, and the fun of watching a great recovery shot. I mean, look at Jordan. He's not on his game right now, but look at the intrigue he creates with kind of the way the Seve style way he plays. And where is he now? And that's fun personality in the game. And then, unfortunately, it's brought on by the fact that he seems to be able to hit a real quacker every once in a while that not many other people seem to hit any longer with a modern driver.
He's electric, isn't he, Spieth? In Tiger in a similar way, electric. When they stand over the ball, doesn't matter who you are, you can't wait to see what's about to happen. That's not true of every player, but when and the same was true of Seve. If he had a club in his hand, you wanted to watch because who knows what might happen. But either way, could be brilliant, could be awful. But either way, there was going to be something that was sort of interesting.
Your golf ball is the most technologically advanced, or it's not. Your golf ball is either the most consistent, or it's not. It's the most trusted, or it's not. The fact is, it's either Titleist, the best performing golf ball in the world, or it's not. Prove it for yourself. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf. What will you play?
On the media thing, Geoff, I wonder, Probably would have just happened sooner. I wonder how Arnold Palmer would have survived in a social media world. He might have felt the fishbowl the way Tiger did. You know, it's a hell of a place to live. I can't imagine you get some of this with some of the things you write. There's with all the controversy around living the PGA Tour, there's some pretty strident people on both sides of that. But some of the things people say on social media can be genuinely hurtful. It's a cesspit, isn't it? If you were a player, it'd be easy to remember all of those horrendous things people have said over any of the good things that people have said. It's a really different environment to what previous generations dealt with, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And again, it's it's shocking what people will say that they would never say to a player's face. I mean, Lexi Thompson's quit social media several times, and you do go into her comments, and you can't really blame her. You're like, what is wrong with you people? you really need to get a life. But I think Palmer would be fine. I don't think he'd read any of the comments. He'd have somebody write his post for him, and I think he'd embrace it. And but he was just a different cat, came from a different era where he knew. Yeah, I just read Hughes Norton's book, and he discussed this a little bit. But they had to sell the game. They knew they had to do this to make some money, and he just was a natural personality, and a humble guy, humbled by his father and different stuff. And I don't mean that in a bad way. He just grew up with a certain kind of upbringing, and it kept him humble, and he loved showing off, and he loved attacking the course. And again, there's just not many people like that, and who get it. That he just was about eye contact. There's just certain people, and through time, Bill Clinton, politicians, different people who have this connection with people and like people a certain way to kind of look at them, and they want to be liked because they connected, and and golf just doesn't breed that. But that does. But again, I think that that's okay. It's a different sport that way, and there are ways to bring out the personality. It's just shocking to me that those in charge don't ever think it's something that involves the rules or the equipment or the courses. I mean, they are finally coming around on courses. I do think it's since we started State of the Game, or a little bit before that, certainly before that, we have finally had the people on a grand scale realize how much the venue matters, either the history, the look of it, the way it plays. But it is startling when you see how little introspection there is by the PGA Tour, for instance, about what they need to do to make sure that the way the game is played breeds interesting golf and interesting people. They just they just think a marketing campaign of some kind, and pictures of a guy with his dog will do it. And we know that stuff's forced. It's how the game is played, where it's played, and the dynamics of a tournament build. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But if you there are natural ways to bring out personality, I guess is what I'm getting at. And they involve the equipment, architecture, the rules, the length of the round. And by the way, I love cranky golfers too. I love when there's somebody who's cranky and
who doesn't,
Toasty, just emerged, and he's kind of a fiery nutbag. I love that. We want that. And I guess that's probably what Liv has also exposed, is they took a lot of the not all, but a lot of quirky characters, a lot of so-called, the bad guy to the good guy. And it really undermined the intrigue level of the PGA Tour that way.
Yeah. A lot of people aren't, but I'm a big fan of Tyrrell Hatton. I think he has the best blow-ups because they're interesting. There's an element of humour usually to it. It's not always funny, and you don't want to encourage that behaviour in kids, but I think he does it as well as anybody ever has in the game. Hatton. He has a dump spit like few others.
Yeah, I just shouldn't spit on greens and stuff like that. But he loses it sometimes. But he's entertaining. We've always had temperamental types, and we don't want to squash that entirely, but it would be nice if they
Kept
just
the lid
certain
on it.
things.
Yes, indeed.
Because when you start spitting on greens, as we've seen with
Yes.
Sergio,
It's awful.
the next stage is you start vandalizing greens, and we don't want him to go there.
No, indeed we don't. You mentioned two things there in particular that I think are of particular interest to you, and the architecture being one of them, and distance. Anybody listening will be surprised we haven't got there yet. The distance the ball goes. I want to go these probably fairly quickly, but talk a bit about, I think the more important of those is the architecture side. And you're right, within golf, there are not enough golfers, I don't think, who pay attention to that. And I say that for all sorts of reasons. The first of them being most golfers would be better golfers if they had an interest in architecture, would they not, Geoff?
Yeah, for sure. They would enjoy the game more.
Yes.
And, but I think we've seen that, Rod. I think in the last, that's why I did my most recent book, because we've seen this change. And I'm going back and updating my Grounds for Golf book. And that was in 2003. And it's amazing the change in the number of people who are interested in architecture, who appreciate what it does for either their enjoyment of the sport or their enjoyment of watching the sport. So, I really, I don't know how you measure it, but the strides have been amazing in the last decade, really.
Yeah, agreed. Well, you only got to look at the number of podcasts now and websites devoted to those kind of things.
Yeah,
it used to be one, and now there's plenty. Where did the interest in architecture grab you? I think most of us understand how you could get interest in golf. You hit that one out of the middle the first time you pick up a club, and it might take you 10 shots, but you finally hit one. That's the appeal of golf. That added element of architecture, not everybody gets to that. Where did that start for you?
Oh, I was one of those weird kids who started drawing golf holes before I even played, and there've been quite a few of those. Just for some reason, I was drawn to that part of it. And then, same thing. My dad had a copy of Golf Architecture in America, and that's such a visually interesting book, which apparently Scotty Scheffler is currently reading and studying as he's getting ready to be involved in a design project. And all that visual stuff that's in the book is just magnificent. So I just always had for some reason, I was just drawn to the idea of what are these things? Why are they this way? And how can they be better? And it's not great for your golf game sometimes if you go too deep into it. You notice everything. But I think that's what makes people like Tiger and Jack and Ben Crenshaw and Jeff Ogilvy fascinating, is they do notice everything, but then they're able to pull the trigger on a shot and not let it influence them. I probably didn't experience quite the same ability to partition. And Mackenzie wrote about that even a little bit. I don't know if he was excusing his bad game. So it was just all those things, and then just exploring on my own, and then I got to meet Ben Crenshaw and some of the guys who shaped for him, and so it was just sort of a natural progression that way. But a lot of it was just wondering why courses are this way, and what's that thing over there that looks like that used to be a bunker. Well, why is that gone? And it kind of got into the old architects and went from there.
What's your own personal golf background? I've never asked you this. I just assumed that you might have played at some college level. I imagine you're probably a decent golfer. Am I right about that? What was your own actual playing background? And we'll come to what your relationship might be with the game now and how much you get to play. But how did that start? Where did you get to in terms of playing?
Yeah, I played junior golf and high school golf, and then went to played college golf, and then just kind of had a wrist injury and burned out on it, and injuries aren't fun, and they can really when I listen to golfers talk, that's again why what Nelly just did. I mean, she had a significant arm injury. She's had a lot of nagging injuries, and to see what she did, the way she's come back and not have the scar tissue that often comes with those injuries is magnificent. So I did all those things, and I got to play a lot of courses. My dad worked for American Golf Corporation. I traveled a lot with him and saw a lot, and I enjoyed all that. The game takes too long for me now, and I can't devote the time to maintaining a game the way I'd like. And I'm one of those people who I love to practice. I love tinkering, hitting balls, which is never great. You can get in a lot of trouble, but yeah, it's a time consuming thing, and I enjoy my work, but my work is around golf. So when I have free time, I don't really want to be around golf.
Yeah.
I prefer a good hike or something. But
It's a conundrum, isn't it?
uh,
So many of us get into the golf industry because we love golf, and then you find that A, you don't get much time to play golf, and B, when you do, you kind of, I wouldn't mind getting away from golf for a little bit, actually, with a bit of spare time. So,
well, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but who cares? I don't think he would care at this point because I think it's well known. But one day I was chatting about some golf stuff. At the Masters, was it last year? I think it was last year with Jim Nance, the broadcaster here in the United States. And Jim played college golf and doesn't play much anymore. And he loves his job and he works his ass off. He's unbelievable how he prepares. But he goes, yeah, he's now a member at Cypress Point, and his son is playing a lot. His young son loves golf, loves the par three course, by the way, at Pebble Beach, the Peter Hay course, which again shows how doesn't matter income level or access or whatever for kids. A par three course is just an amazing way to start the game because the scale is right. And then for somebody like Jim, it's fun because he really doesn't have the time, but he gets it around. He plays with his son, and it's the highlight of his week when they do that. And but it takes an hour and whatever. Anyway, he was saying, next time you're up, I'm now a member at Cypress Point, and he knew I'd written a book on it, of course, and he goes, we'll go out and play. I go, oh, that's great. Yeah, I don't play much these days. And before I could even say much, I wasn't saying no, but before I could say anything, he goes, oh, you're like me. You like to be around the game, but you don't really like to play it as much anymore. I go, exactly, Jim. I still love being around it, following it, and watching it unfold and all that. But yeah, it takes a lot of time, and I admire the people who find the time. But it's hard to do especially when you're on the media side, and you feel like you have to be kind of connected all the time and to be ready. And I've cut back on that because I'm not on Twitter as much, and the newsletter is more of when I'm ready to put something out or I know it's built around a tournament. So that's actually helping. I'm actually seeing some changes that will probably make me want to start playing a little bit more again because I'm managing my time. But in our world, you can get so caught up in all of that. And I think being in the PGA Tour, being obnoxious has really helped. I don't feel like I have to sit around and watch much of it, except maybe Sunday afternoon to see who's playing well going into the majors. And it's wonderful. Yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. I'm finding my attention span on books is so much better again. And so there's some and that's why I think is so exciting. And another thing that's amazing about golf's prosperity right now is that we were told for so many years, I think rightly so, that consumption of social media and more digital lives were undercutting people's willingness to play. Well, I think the pandemic and some other things, and people have probably come to this realization before I did, that it's just such a terrible waste of time. Yes. Sometimes. Sometimes you have to do it for your job, but there are better things to be doing outdoors, fresh air, recreation. It's great recreation. And so I think that's another fascinating thing in this upsurge of the game that it's overcome. That's another thing it's kind of overcome.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, about doing what we do, Geoff, particularly you, where you do cover a lot of professional golf, being around professional golfers all the time makes one's own inadequacies amplified, doesn't it? When you step onto the golf course, you know what pros do, then you see what you do, and you think, I don't belong here. This is not up to snuff. This golf game that I'm dragging around with me. You mentioned your dad there briefly, and of course, your dad's pretty well known in the States in basketball. Yeah.
Well, he was a while ago. It was. I don't know about now. But it is funny. Sometimes people will say they'll still be surprised that I'm related, and I'm like, you're not even old enough to have watched those basketball teams. But yeah, they were. UCLA was an amazing. When we have the great dynasties in American sports, or the in basketball, the Celtics and the Lakers and the NBA. and UCLA and Kentucky and Duke and basketball, and I guess North Carolina I'll throw in there too. And that's why they call them the Blue Bloods, because they all have blue uniforms. They've won a majority of the championships, or at least they did before whatever this is now with NIL and stuff. And so, yeah, they were one of the great dynasties in all of American sports, and one of the great legendary coaches, John Wooden, who he played for, and whose values and teachings are still incredibly relevant, maybe even more so than ever. And I've really come to appreciate a lot of his way about approach to sports. And you see people still worshiping that, I think, more than ever for the obvious reasons. The way sports has become increasingly transactional in not an attractive way often.
Mm. And is there anything to take from that? You mentioned that your dad worked for American Golf, I think you said, sort of after that. Is there any crossover from the basketball and being surrounded by all of those great athletes and the great coach you mentioned in John Wooden? Does any of that come over to golf? Do you bring any of that from there? And does that help fuel interest, or is it just two separate sports? Because you've got interest beyond just golf too. I think horse racing is another one of yours that you're quite keen on.
I like most sports. I mean, I don't follow soccer, and I don't pay attention to hockey, but pretty much everything else I enjoy and find. I find beauty and fascination in every sport, and the parallels with golf, or the lack of parallels, and the things that make golf stand out. So I think all sports there's something there, and I mean, you see it with baseball and hockey, how much those guys love golf. The thing that I guess that I see that I try to convey sometimes, and it always sounds probably, well, it's just hard for people for golf to get, but golfers tend to feel inadequate. And that's why we get all this stuff about athletes today. And, we don't call them golfers now, we call them athletes. And it's sort of this, and I mock the kind of overcompensating for this. And it bothers me because, one, we know you have to have some athletic ability to play golf. And it's sort of I get that, as somebody who carried the golf clubs to school for a high school match, and people look at you like you're such a loser. I get that. I've come from that myself. But the thing that I guess that and I probably got this from the few times I was around Coach Wooden before he passed. He always wanted to talk about golf. And most of the great athletes in the world love golf. They're fascinated by it. I mean, it's very rare that there's a great athlete in the world who looks down on golf. And even like two of the great icons in Los Angeles, LeBron James and Clayton Kershaw, pitcher for the Dodgers, and of course LeBron James, the basketball player. Actually, we're on the record not that long ago as kind of, I didn't really get golf or whatever. Well, LeBron's son one day got into it, and now he's actually an investor in the Strategic Sports Group thing. And I don't know how invested he is, but there have been some interesting things. He did a Q&A with Rory during the LA Open this year. There's just a point where an athlete starts to recognize, wow, what these guys do is unbelievable. Clayton Kershaw now is totally hooked on golf. He thought it was stupid. Now he's hooked. He's fascinated by it. His son's into it. He understands. He loves the parallels with baseball. He loves how it's different. And so that's the thing I always try to convey, is that golf needs to stop trying to say we're just as athletic as those other athletes and overdoing it, when most of the greatest athletes of all time think the world of golfers. And by the way, most of those people, when you put a golf club in their hand, these great athletes, they don't look that great swinging a golf club.
That's right.
Some do. We've seen some who just have a beautiful golf swing, like Mookie Betts for the Dodgers right now. Beautiful golf swing. He's just good at everything he does. But we've seen these people who are held up. Michael Jordan. He watched my dad. One day we were at Riviera. He was playing with Ernie Banks, who was another great baseball player for the Cubs. And he was watching. We knew he was playing. I was, a young guy, and Riviera has this practice fairway between the first and second holes. And we saw him watching us. And then when they played the first hole, he kind of stopped and was watching and my dad has he's left-handed and a beautiful swing and beautiful tempo. And he was just watching him like kind of in this weird sort of worshipful way. And it was funny to me because here's, one of the greatest athletes we know. And his golf swing's kind of,
yeah, he's a good player.
He's a good golfer. He's good enough golfer and gets it around, but it's kind of not that, for a guy who was so silky smooth, with his shot and everything. It's kind of awkward looking.
You feel like he's bludgeoned his way to his handicap, just sheer bloody mindedness and determination to get good with whatever he sort of has.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but we do know how athletes, they know somebody's action is good. I mean, look at Ludwig Ober. I mean, he just is. Look at that swing. I mean, that's ridiculous. How effortless it is, and beautiful and athletic, and the tempo, the whole thing. It's just beautiful to look at.
You don't have to be
you can recognize it.
You don't have to be a good dancer to spot a dancer who's good, do you? Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Non-golfer would see Aberg.
So I wish golf would stop trying so hard to I wish it would just understand that most of the greatest athletes of all time are totally impressed and worship and respect what pro golfers do and what golfers do in general.
Yeah, indeed. All of which leads me to, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I did want to talk to you about this. I know you've got a book out at the moment, but writing, Geoff, where did that come from? And particularly writing about golf, smaller the ball, better the writing and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. There has been some fabulous golf writing, and I find the best golf writing is fantastic. Where did the interest in writing come for you? Is it an interest in writing, or is it an interest in being a part of the information cycle and contributing in that way?
Probably the latter. I wrote for my 6th grade paper and my high school paper I was the editor of, and just was always drawn to that, and did a little bit of it initially in college, and then but no, I never really set out to be a writer. I didn't really read a lot until my 20s, and just there was nothing in particular that made me think that's what I want to do, but it just kind of became what I started to do, and still trying to get better at it, and still trying to kind of keep up with how things are constantly changing. I do think it's kind of strange now. It seems like the smaller the ball, the worse. I'm not going to say the worse the writing, just because there's still some really fantastic writers in the game right now. It's just that what we know is that they can't really do what writers of the past could do. Explain
that's
one of the joys of what I do with the newsletters. I'm not a slave to social media. I'm not a slave to traffic. I'm not a slave to covering the thing right now that we've got. It's brutal what a lot of these really great writers have to do to kind of maintain their job, and they don't get to do those great stories. And it's really sad. It's not great for the sport, but then you can make the case, well, there's a lot of other stuff that's being done with video and features in YouTube that are filling some of that, and obviously podcasts are filling. The Masters this year credentialed a lot of people whose only role is a podcast. Yep. They don't write, and that is huge change for them because they value the writer there so much. But it's just how podcasts are probably the number one way that a lot of people get their information in golf now, and it's not a bad thing. But I do think there's still a joy in the great deep magazine profile, or the really great opinion piece, and the cranky rant, or the thing that puts something in perspective that you didn't really see. And I still enjoy trying to do all those things in some way. But there's these publications, there's just not much incentive to do that kind of stuff.
Their business model has changed so much. It's easy to point at, mainstream media, quote unquote, for want of a better term. But the reality is that, talk about disruption, perhaps no industry's ever been disrupted quite as much as media has been disrupted in the last sort of 20 years. And it's been a slow boil too, like the frog in the water. It just, the temperature just keeps going up. So there's been this scramble to find how to get it. For all of that, Geoff, a book is a daunting proposition for someone who's written a column before. 500 words is more than enough for my tiny brain to try and comprehend. How many books have you done? And where does the Where does that come from? I've never thought to myself I'd like to write a book. Do you like to write books, or do you feel you need to write books? Where does the book writing come from? Tell me how many you've done.
No, I've done them all because it was fun and it was something I wanted to do. I've never done one sort of on spec as something that somebody said, "Hey, what about this?" And so no, it was never a problem for me. And obviously, several of my books are heavily geared towards photographs and artwork, but I enjoyed the search for those in the golden age of golf design or Cypress Point. And so, yeah, I would only do a book because it's fun for me to do. And if it's fun for me, then I would hope then it's a fun book to have and read. And so, yeah, that was the reason for the most recent book, because it was the first one I'd done in a while. But I just felt like there was, I had something to say on golf architecture that was a little bit different than other books I'd done or anybody else had done. And I wasn't trying to do a definitive book. I was just trying to do something that gave people a little different perspective on how they look at a course and how they think about a course and what really matters in the sport to our enjoyment. And I feel good about it. The only thing I feel bad about is I cut a bunch, and then when the book came out, it's like, well, this is tiny. I cut about 10,000 words, but I wanted to keep it tight. I did not want it to be a long read. I want it to be a concise read, and the publisher agreed with that. And maybe we should have used thicker paper or something. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to prolong the ordeal, because I really do think that course design analysis is starting to get a little bit out of control, with the rankings and the criteria and the this and the that. And I was trying to cut through some of that.
Yeah. We do that to golf, don't we? In all ways, this notion of, we kind of end up overdoing it, like you say, with rankings and this criteria. It's trying to put into a box something that doesn't fit in a box, a little bit like golf itself, isn't it? We try to make a championship golf course. It's got to be a par 72 and 4 par 5s and 4 par 3s. All of which is completely anti to the very notion of golf, which is just, there's so much randomness to it that you don't sort of put those shackles on. Let's talk about the latest book. I've read it. I've been lucky. Give people a little taste of what it is that you were trying to achieve. It's an intriguing concept that you came up with, and the sort of the series of boxes that you might tick. But tell people what the latest book's about, where they can get it also.
Well, for a while, I just started asking myself certain questions about a golf course, and not relying on a certain criteria or just a random give it a number thing. Although I don't discourage that, but I just thought, well, but what do those things accomplish? What do they? Because people would always say, well, I like a course, but I don't know why, or I hate a course and I didn't know why. And so I just kind of kept coming back to two questions for a long time that I initially had been discouraged from, which was memorability, essentially. And after you play it, can you remember all the holes? Because that comes up in a lot of conversations. People would always say, yeah, I just played there last week. I can't even remember half the holes already. And well, that tells you something about a course in a lot of different ways. So I wanted to break down what that's speaking to. And we all know there's a couple of different questions we always ask. Is it a course you could play every day and enjoy? Or is it a course, or what's the one course you'd like to play every day the rest of your life? If you could. And I lean towards asking the question of, is this a course you could enjoy every day? Because it definitely speaks to architectural elements that I get into in the book that really do matter, and it really do speak to whether the architect did a good job. And then the last thing that kind of came about was more of visits to Scotland, and just realizing that my first two questions weren't addressing that intangible, that kind of mysterious thing we love about a course. It's just a beautiful walk in the park. It's the scenery is pleasing to you in a certain way. The vibe is pleasing. The desire to want to kind of hang out there and come back and dig into the mysteries of the design. And that was where the sort of the question of is it a place you'd want to bring your dog to take a walk came from. And that one, I explained in the book, came directly from an experience of watching a dog enjoying a golf course the day after several days of walking around U.S. Open course. That was a modern design that was just enormous, just kind of a ridiculously large place that you would not take a dog for a walk. And so I just wanted to focus on those three questions and try to give people three simple questions to ask, and then how you can have fun with that in debates and so on and so forth with the what we love about architecture, which is that argument and that because it's just a natural inclination. You hear people go to these resorts with did people like which course at Barnes Boogle did you like better, or which course at Bandon what was your favorite? Rank them, and I get all that, but I was kind of hoping with this to just push a little bit deeper, but not egregiously so, if that makes sense. To give you some things to be able to explain why you feel a certain way about a golf course, and those questions I feel like cover that pretty well.
Yeah, there's lots of golfers, Geoff, who don't sort of get that or engage in that, aren't they? You would have come across them yourself. There are golfers who will tell you to your face, put their fingers in their ears and go, if you start to talk golf course design or architecture. They just don't have an interest, do they? And I wonder how that kind of happens, because to me, if you play golf and you have a hole that you prefer over another hole, by default, you've had to have an interest in architecture, haven't you? Whether you've admitted it to yourself or not. I wonder why people resisted so much. And have we, in the subset of golf course architecture nerds, put people off with the way we talk about that somehow? I felt like one of the really interesting things about this latest book of yours, and Grounds for Golf, another one of yours, which I think is a great introduction to golf course architecture, it doesn't have that snobby feel to it, but that's what you often get referred to as you're a snob if you're interested in golf course architecture. Try and unpack some of that for us.
Yes. Well, I think we're breaking that down right now, which is exciting. I mean, I still hear some discussion of architecture that you go, oh yeah, that's going to turn people off. And that was what I was really trying to get away from. And the sort of the, you see it in the way people write about art or even some music, or certainly about wine. That just goes off the deep end and loses sight of, well, is this thing playable or not? Is this fun to play or not? And I think the fun word is what I think that's probably what inspired me more than anything, was just how much fun got hijacked in that quest to be an elite piece of architecture that could host tournaments and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, yeah, but is it any fun? It's like, well, some albums are these amazing works of craftsmanship, of musicianship and lyrics, but do you really want to listen to it again? Were there any melodies? Were there any, fun songs? Did it kind of go up and down? Did it touch you in certain ways? And does it get better when you revisit it? And that sort of dark kind of intellectual over intellectualized view of how a work of art should be just sort of is depressing. Because I love the debate. I love people who really break something down and take it seriously. That's great. We want that. We want great criticism and reviews. But sometimes you read it, you just so much of the stuff just feels like an excuse to use big words and phrases and to sound. And I get into that in the book about routing has kind of been hijacked as this thing that makes I can see the routing and and it's a buzzword, but it's very hard to really to know where the architect went right or wrong with the routing unless you saw the property before and you knew the restrictions they were dealing with, which there are usually a lot. So I was trying to just kind of get past all that and highlight the fun of being an armchair architect, of being a little bit of a critic, and but without just devoting gobs and gobs and hours of reading the old books and all that. And the response has been great, so I'm happy about that, and happy that there were some people who I've even had people ask me now, is it okay if I assign a number to each of the three questions? Like, oh, yeah, I wrote that in the book. Do whatever you want with it. It's more about that you ultimately ask these questions and you get more satisfaction out of studying a course or playing it or hating it and being able to explain why.
That could be fun sometimes too. Kind of golf architecture for normal
absolutely.
people. Golf architecture for normal people. That's the title.
Yes,
Got
that
it.
is the
Yeah.
title.
And it's certainly sort of hit on something there. By the nature and by default, the nature of particularly what you do, I do less of these days, which is writing regularly about golf. There's going to be a focus, Geoff, on what's controversial or negative, for want of a better term. Where do you still find the joys in the game? Because it's part of the media's responsibility to point out where things can be better. But if you do that all the time, you can start to sound like a negative Nancy, can't you?
Yeah.
For those who might think, and we all get accused of it, that, your only interest is talking the game down and, why do you bother covering the game? You must hate the game. You never say anything good about it. What are the good things that you still take from golf? What sort of keeps you going in that way?
Well, I think I shifted to just covering the majors because I just feel like those are the weeks where all these elements come together in a really beautiful way, and it's exciting to just everything, the golf course, the business side of it, and then of course the actual tournament, and of course the fan experience, all that. I think they're just special weeks, and that's kind of why I've shifted to those, and very glad I did. I get why people get bothered by some of the negativity, but I would also argue that, well, a lot of us highlighting some of these things that have changed in the game, and they used to be a certain way, and now those things are gone, and that's not a good thing. Well, I think that's had a great effect in recent years, that there are a bunch of people who have pushed for saying, hey, these are the values that are the timeless ideals and values and traits of the sport. And when you crap on those, we don't like it, and we're pointing it out. And there's a reason. We're not doing it just to be negative, but to actually try to contribute to the betterment of the sport. And I think that's happened, and it's been pretty exciting. More recently, I think the players are doing a lot of the work themselves without writers having to point it out, which is both a blessing and a curse, I guess. But I started to see that kind of change, that they were getting more and more obnoxious, and don't miss having to do some of the things you have to do on a daily publication or a weekly to try to keep up with all that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like it. Yeah. It's I feel like I'll tell you one thing. So Fred Ridley, the Masters chairman, came up. He goes around the press center one day at the Masters, and he came up and he goes, "Oh, I've really been enjoying what you've been writing, and but there was one piece I really enjoyed, and he mentioned this one where I talked about how a golf tournament is all these crazy things that have to come together to really be a success. But it's a beautiful thing that happens. The course, the volunteers." The players, of course, have to perform, but television, the media, the way it's covered, the fan experience, the weather. I mean, there's just all these things, and it's something that the players often are losing sight of, and the people around them telling them it's all about them. You just show up and people will watch. Well, no, it's not that. I mean, you see Liv, they have a philosophy of trying to make those things all come together, and some weeks it just, no matter what tour it is, it just doesn't happen. Some weeks it does, and that's just it's the most unusual of all sporting events that way. It's not in this set arena or venue. They move around, and you have to construct all these things, and then the course, you certain holes create a kind of an atmosphere, and some of them take a life of their own, as we've seen, and that's cool. The 17th at Sawgrass, or the 16th at the Waste Management, or of course Amen Corner at Augusta, and that's a beautiful thing. I love when it all comes together, and I love highlighting that. So I guess that would be the answer to your question. I think that's still a lot of fun, and it's also now kind of fun to point that out, that it's not just the players, and we have all this data coming in that shows that we just have a lot of proof that it's more than just them. Yeah. Not that we don't love them and
no.
perform. And in fact, I was one of the people who wrote extensively bitching and moaning about all the stupid things done to not let them show off what they do. Bad course setup, and just stuff that just going to bad golf courses, and growing rough, and taking shots away from them. And I think we've seen huge progress in that people see the venue as vital to putting on a good show and letting them perform. And so when when we talk about equipment, people think we want to take that away from them. It's actually the opposite. We think that we want to make sure that the really great players stand out, and also that the game somewhat reflects elements of the past and things that have worked in the past. And now I think you're seeing that even on the distance debate. People are starting to realize, this is kind of stupid. I mean, this year is the first year I've really heard that at Augusta, where I heard multiple comments like, the tee's way back there. We're not going back there, or things like that. It's just stupid. Yeah. And I think the women playing the course for the members' tees has contributed to that somewhat.
In what way? What do you mean?
People see them play a green, finish the hole, and just walk right over to the next tee. Yeah. And instead of spending 2 minutes going back to the 11th tee or the 13th tee or the 7th tee, I mean, it's the 5th tee. It's and you just see this little change. It's just this natural. Oh, they're done there, and boom, they're ready to tee off. And isn't that just a more beautiful version of the game? So it's weird things like that allow people to recognize what you and I and Clates and others have been.
It's such a subtle about for a subtle beauty of the game, isn't it? That green to next tee. Unless you really thought about it, you wouldn't understand. And it was one of the things, if anyone who's played the old course will know this. You walk off the second, you could putt down to the third tee off the second green at the old course. So you literally just walk down a slope, the grass doesn't change, and you hit off from the next. And when you do that, it hits you. Wow, this is different and interesting. But you're right, a 100-meter walk back to the tee.
It's awful. And it gets back to the roots of the game. Well, it was this cross-country thing. Yeah. And you kind of played, and then the next tee was literally too close to the hole. It was right there.
Two clubs, dig a bit out of the hole and pile up.
We need to get it a little bit away. Right. But and so there are reasons that we point this stuff out, because when you do see it or you experience it for yourself, you go, oh yeah, that is so much better. And it is, like you say, they're subtle. They're strange little subtleties that we love. When we did Rustic Canyon, when it opened, we have 3 long walks from green to the next tee because of environmental reasons, or one spot in the routing where we wanted a certain way, and one spot, the 18th, where it just wouldn't have been a good tee shot teeing off over this hazard. And environmentally, you just walk over. Anyway, all anybody ever talked about were those 3 walks, and it's like, wait a second, we got away with some of the shortest green to tee walks that you can get in modern golf because of, for legal reasons, a lot of people are very cautious and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, that's what you seize on. So anyway, you have to point some of these things out, and so I enjoy still doing that, but I enjoy it more now because you see right now in the game, it feels like there are more people who get it, or they want to get it a little bit more, and that's fun. Yeah,
and that's, you could probably point to the internet for much of that, and bringing people together in a way that was very difficult prior to, where you suddenly had Golf Club Atlas is the one I always point to, a place where these people with these interests could gather. There's no more than 2 or 3 members at most clubs who've got an interest in architecture. So unless you happen to find each other, you start. Well, I think that's changed. Yes, I agree.
It's increasing here. I would also say it's just, the fun word, used to be such a bad word. And so getting that to be the priority just changes everything. It gets people off this, the various obsessions with length and 7,500 yards and hitting par 72. There's still a lot of that. Don't get me completely, but we have definitely got more people asking the most important question is, how does this make the game more fun for more people? And look, I mean, I still hear horror stories of architects at clubs and the stupid things that members come up with. But I think there are more tools now to educate people or to point out those things. As you say, the internet, a lot of different people doing and just doing good stuff that explains stuff, or, Fried Egg and Eric Anders Lang has a whole following where he's exposed people to other kinds of golf, to, laying up, of course, is just doing incredible stuff on that front. So there are ways. And then, of course, the drone has, and I got into that a little bit in the book, has really changed people's perspective of the beauty of a course in a way that aerials and blimps and things just never did.
Yeah.
And that's just going to keep happening. I think it's probably become the most important tool in terms of highlighting why we love architecture.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, just look at those shots at Augusta this year. I mean, they were just, I don't know if you got to see, they killed time at the end of the day with them. They just were spectacular.
Yeah, indeed. Ultimately, in a capitalist system, demand drives supply, doesn't it? And the more we demand better architecture, you'd think the more supply of better architecture we're going to get. We got a supply and demand of difficult golf in the 80s and 90s in particular. I think was there even a America's most difficult golf courses list at some point where they ranked?
Well, that's how Golf Digest list started.
Yeah. So moving away.
But that was in the late 60s.
Yeah. Fun is back. Let's hope the word sporty comes back to golf too. I always love reading old stories about golf courses where they talk about it being sporty. Final question, Geoff, even though I could talk to you for hours and have done over the years and probably will do again in smallish chunks, but are you optimistic about golf?
I am. I would have thought things would have really quieted down a little bit, but I think the work patterns, at least in the U.S., have changed. I can't believe some of the. I mean, I went over to hit some balls at Rancho Park, and I just didn't even bother. The line was so long to hit balls, I couldn't. I went, no, I don't do lines to hit off a bad map and hit glorified pickleballs. I just wasn't in the mood for that. But yeah, I am. I think the outdoor element. I think the number of kids who are drawn to it now. Increasingly, we've got some. I don't know. It's not cool, but it's not a sport for geeks anymore. More and more people know that some of the greatest athletes in the world right now love golf. I mean, it's astonishing how many of them do, and even a lot of course, the rock musicians still keep it secret. They don't. Dylan loved golf. I think he's gotten to the age now where I don't think he plays much, but he played a ton of golf, but he kept it so secret. Neil Young too. He plays golf. I just found this out recently. Totally keeps it on the down low, because that might taint the image of the artist. Yeah. But yeah, I'm bullish on a lot of different fronts. I think we need to keep fighting for these public courses. We need to keep building par 3 courses, and if there's a golf course that's endangered, somehow at least saving it in terms of maybe going to 9 holes and a range and a Himalayas or something. And that's happened a few times, and they've been spectacular successes that for places that were otherwise doomed. And then whatever happened to the other acreage happens. So yeah, I just think that the only dangers right now are cost. Obviously a downturn economically would be will have a huge impact, but
on playing though, do you think, Geoff? I think hasn't the experience been previously in a recession that golf, the business of golf, selling clubs and hardware and those things, perhaps less so, but that golf actually does quite well in a recession. If people lose their job and have more time, one of the things they'll do to fill it, ironically, cheaply, there's no cheaper way to fill 4 or 5 hours than to go and play golf. That's previously been the experience. So that might be a mixed bag. But I think you're right. If you're in, well, particularly the way hardware works these days, the numbers they pay the players for endorsement and the rate that they push out new equipment, that must be a daunting proposition to be a golf club manufacturer and have to come up with 1 or 2 new clubs a year and then sell a few 100,000 of them to break even. It's an awkward business model, isn't it, in so many ways? So you can understand why that.
Well, yeah, it's a terrible one in that it's just driven by Wall Street. It doesn't make sense, but they're making it work because the sport's healthy. And that interview I watched with the TaylorMade CEO, it's becoming clear they finally have realized, wow, if the game is healthy, they're going to do well.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who's playing their clubs. I mean, that's nice. Scotty Scheffler will sell some clubs because there is a group that buys everything. But for the most part, their businesses are thriving because the sport is healthy and people just will buy clubs, or they'll buy a used club. You know how it works. So they'll start with that, and then they'll eventually upgrade if they're doing well enough in life and that kind of thing. But the prices are getting kind of nuts, and the prices for used clubs are shocking to me. They don't age as well as the old persimmons. You think, oh my gosh, you want $200? This thing looks like somebody dragged it from the back of a car. It looks awful. It's cheaply made and all that. But yeah, so they So this addiction of selling people what the pros play, which we know has been at the heart of the resistance to tinker with the equipment rules, is just being blown out of the water. It's just over. That's just a small subset of people buy what the pros play, and you kind of hear that now in comments by some of these golf industry people, because the health of the sport has been maintained, and therefore, oh wait, we're just moving stuff not because of any generational player that came along that inspired people to buy. So I think that's a really fascinating thing to see, but ultimately it just comes down to free time, recession, no recession, thriving economy, whatever. If people have more time, and I think that's why that comment by Steve Cohen's really interesting, that they see us eventually landing on a 4-day work week, which is a product in some sense of the pandemic, and that therefore keeping this momentum going with the game, and also just all the efforts that have been made to break down the idea that a golfer is somebody who has a handicap, plays on Saturdays at a club, has plays by the rules of golf, has 14 clubs, and a closet full of logo sweaters, and it's not. There's just all sorts of ways to be in the game, and not being checking off all those boxes, and breaking that down, I think, is really good for the sport, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, indeed. I couldn't agree more. No matter where you stand on any of these issues, this has to be one of the most interesting periods for the game in its history, doesn't it? This last 10 years and the next 10, and what's going to look like after that is the most interesting thing imaginable, I think.
No question. There are going to be a lot of people who look back on this and they're going to be fascinated, I think, by some of the changes. They're going to question why it took so long for certain things to happen. And that's fine. But, and then, obviously and then on the professional side, it's really going to be an interesting time. But I also think that if we continue on the trajectory we're on, there's going to be some very dark views of this period 20 years from now. Like, well, gosh, it became apparent that a 7,600-yard course was really not a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, how did it take that long to enact some rules that maybe put an end to that? And how did it take so long to build more par 3 courses and other stuff that made the game more welcoming, and take advantage of the fact that football gives you brain injuries and golf doesn't, unless you get hit by a golf ball. But the chances of that, we know, aren't too great. So I do think there's going to be some of that down the road. I don't see the sport down the road going, oh, we need to get longer. It needs to get harder. We need to get rid of this whole stuff about fun, and we got to stop people having such a good time on the course. And I don't see that happen.
It's such an internal discussion, that one, isn't it, Geoff? The distance one especially is infuriating, because distance has zero impact on non-golfers converting to become golfers. Zero, literally zero. Those who are on that train are fighting over the existing pie. They're doing nothing to grow the game, or all of that stuff they're just, if you pick that narrative, what you're saying is, we don't care if there's any more golfers, we just want a bigger slice of the pie of existing golfers. And it doesn't feel like a healthy way to approach a business, really. I mean, if you're in the business of making and selling golf clubs, you want more and more golfers. Do something to help create them. The distance ain't it.
I know, and it's and again, we know why they do it. It does appeal to certain people, but I do think you're seeing cracks in the way they are discussing the game. I'd love to see, I'd love to have seen this attitude and this realization come to sooner. I mean, just remember, the USGA and the R&A tried to loosen up the equipment rules for them to create and innovate for beginners and lesser golfers, and they went, no, we don't want that. So they're still they still have a ways to go, but and they may come crawling back on that at some point here soon when they run out of ideas. But right now they're selling so much stuff that they are just fine with it. But you still would love to see a little more vision on that side of the industry when it comes to understanding what you just said, which is that it's it's not what ultimately draws a vast majority of the people to enjoying the sport.
Indeed. Well, it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold, Geoff. It's going to be interesting to read your thoughts if anybody hasn't done so. Well worth subscribing to Geoff's Substack's newsletter. It's called The Quadrilateral. Geoff, where do people find it? Where do people find your books? Where can they follow you and keep up with you and get your thoughts? Those who aren't already, shame on you if you're not.
Just Google, I'm a Geoff, like Geoff Ogilvy, and golf, and my website usually comes up, and it's all right there, the books, the links. I think in Australia, Amazon is the best bet for the book. It's a small publisher, and shipping from here is
brutal,
rather pricey for
yes.
them. So Amazon is, I believe, the best option there. And everything there on the newsletter and all that's on the website. And I do focus on the majors and the women's somewhat, not as much as the men's, obviously, if you look at what I post, but I do kind of drift every once in a while. And like I said, I'm compiling some stuff right now on some of these interesting comments of late. And I do think they have parallels with a lot of the things we've discussed. So it's fun to do that kind of stuff. And it's fun to not have to convince an editor that
it's worth publishing. You just press send.
Yeah, I just do it.
That's right.
And typos and all.
Let the cards fall where they may. Women's golf, Geoff. There's a whole other episode. There's a whole series of episodes in that as a topic. We don't have time for it today, but
it's just right now with women's sports. I went to a panel on Saturday, and it opened my mind to a bunch of things. It wasn't a panel on women's sports, but one of the authors has written a book about women's sports in the U.S., and then the other two writers. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing. And I floated it at the Masters a few times, and I didn't get many takers, but I see potential parallels with the rise of women's basketball, volleyball, softball in the U.S., with women's golf having the same potential opportunity. And a lot of it comes down to what we know. The power game is not that interesting. It breeds kind of a jerk. And all of this talk of money, when you make the sport so transactional, and we haven't even gotten into golf betting as deep as we thought they were going to push it. The more you do that, you push a lot of people away. And right now, women's sports of the U.S. are taking those people who are sick of all the transactional stuff. They're not sick of, I think that's the other thing. I don't have to go on. I know you were about to wrap.
Episode 2 starting.
It's not even about the money. I think a very few people have hostility to players for being paid. Mm-hmm. What they're hostile to is that everything that's done is a transaction, and everything that a player does to show up or that engages you as a fan because he wants you to buy something. Eventually, you just get tired of that, and we're seeing it in college athletics. Where we have this transfer portal and all these things where it's just everything is a transaction, and it's and I think the women's sports don't have that going on as much, or when they do, it's because they legitimately are underpaid, and people want to see them pay properly.
Yeah.
So
look, ironically, one of the
like you
sides.
said, it's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But I think women's golf has a great chance to seize on that. And in addition to the things that you and Clates and I have discussed, most of the most beautiful golf swings in the world belong to women, although So Yeon Ryu just retired.
We lost one
guest on our show.
Yeah, beautiful.
Lost one of the great swings. I mean, we haven't lost it. She's just retiring. Yeah. But there are parallels where the game is more relatable, just on and on, where they have an opportunity if they can seize it.
Well, for the first time in a long time, Geoff, we've got an American superstar at the top of women's golf in Nelly Korda doing genuinely historic things, remarkable things at the moment. And you'd have to think that that's a real positive because that American market is so important for women's golf. It's a global game, and we know it's massive in South Korea in particular, but that American market's really important. And an American player, like it or not, will help drive interest from the American, and that'll be healthy for the game going forward. Yeah, so fantastic. No question. Enough out of us. Geoff, been fabulous to talk again. We'll organise a State of the Game episode soon if people
we have matters to discuss with Clates. So yes, we have plenty to discuss. Starting with Anthony Kim's remarks on coming out of his coma and getting on launch monitors and hitting the modern driver. We'll have some fun with that.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking forward to it, as should the listeners be. Great to chat to you today. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Rod.
The problem with these long-form interviews is that no matter how much ground you cover, you always worry about what was left out, which in this case was a lot. But I hope you found what we discussed of enough interest to keep you listening. You'll find links in the show notes to Geoff's blog and his Substack newsletter, and you can find and purchase his books by searching all the usual places online. His latest, Golf Architecture for Normal People, I can personally highly recommend. Well, that's it for episode 118 of The Thing About Golf, but make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode.